Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and this afternoon we are going to be diving deep into part 2 of the Law of Love. A year ago, precisely a year ago, in fact, we dedicated the live stream a post. I should really have this queued up, but I had to reboot my computer because my microphone wasn't working again. So all of my windows were closed. And it was one of these last minute things again. So where are my videos? And actually, there's a easier way for me to do this. So a year ago, because it was post Valentine's Day, a year ago, just as it is today, we did this live stream called The Law of Love. And suffice it to say, we, got quite a ways into that subject, but quite a lot has happened since last year and since last week, in fact. And it is on that basis that today we are going even deeper into the law of love. And it would be really nice if I could if I could find it. Why is it so difficult to find? There it is. There it is. Because it's all out of order on Windows. Okay. So this is what the thumbnail was a year ago. And one of the things that we emphasized a year ago, without having actually rewatched this this live stream, I never rewatch any of my live streams, unless, of course, I'm making snippets out of those live streams. But I was told not to do that anymore, so I don't really rewatch live streams anymore. Not even to edit them, because I was told not to edit them into smaller, bite-sized portions. I was told that that's unnecessary. Don't waste my time. So I would have emphasized, or I did emphasize, as I often do, the nature of love as severity and mercy in balanced measure, applied unconditionally with infinite wisdom. Now, clearly, we mortals do not possess infinite wisdom. So when I speak of the law of love, clearly I'm speaking of divine love, because what else would be able to establish a law but divinity, but God itself? So it is on that basis that we will be continuing our exploration and comprehension of this phenomenon of love and how it relates to God himself, the nature of God, which is pure, unadulterated, unconditioned selflessness, the no self, the absolute abstract nothingness. But it's completely unconditioned. But it is pure selflessness, as I've explained previously. Since January, there's been a progression to our live streams, and each one seems to be, in some ways, building on the previous. And today will be no exception, because last week we were looking at the Tao, and in the beginning, the word, and the dynamic between the verb and the adverb, right? The verse, the verb and the verse and the adversary, and adversity and verses, and how this spawns the universe, and in fact, the greatest teacher that exists, the university of life. Because it's interesting how all these words relate to one another. And we were exploring the magic of all that language last week. But without knowing it at the time, last week was actually preparing us for today's topic of love and the true nature of love. And when we look at these words, severity and mercy, they have their expression in what is known as, oh, here's another window that got closed on me. Bear with me while, because this is always the case. Somehow I always have technical details or technical difficulties always at the last minute. And I feel that it's part of the test, right? Can I remain calm and cool and collected, or just laugh it off as opposed to getting all stressed out and anxious and like I would normally do, or what I used to do. So where are we? We don't want to be here. We want to be here. And we want to go down to diagrams. We have a folder called diagrams, and it is this one that we were looking for. Okay, laws. Let me share this. No, let me make myself smaller so you guys can see. Can you guys see that? Should I make it, try to make it bigger? How's that? Okay. So in the absolute reality, we have one law. And maybe I can get away with doing that. If you guys can't see that, just let me know. And I'll actually move that down, because we don't have to necessarily look at all the ego stuff. Our interest right now for today is because we're looking at the law of love. So we're looking at the nature of that law. And God is love. So the nature of selflessness. But how that unfolds, we know from last week. It unfolds as stanza and substance, as positive and negative, as a duality. But we also know that the configuration, this is in the beginning of the word and so on, we went over this last week, but the configuration of that duality, as we know, looks something like this, or at least this is our best approximation. And there is more to this particular symbol than duality, the stanza and substance that are dancing the dance, the eternal dance, the cosmic dance. But what is it precisely? What are we witnessing here? And there is another symbol that we can turn to comprehend the action that is taking place. And that symbol, of course, is the ouroboros, or ouroboros, or however you want to pronounce that particular word. The symbol is what's important. And of course, it's in the background behind me. It is the serpent eating his own tail. And we should go down to here, and we should have here. This is goodness. There we go. So this is just a rather colorful depiction of this particular symbol of the ouroboros, the serpent that eats its own tail. What that means is, practically speaking, that in the duality, there is a dynamic. And that dynamic is consuming and being consumed. This dynamic, this law, this action, the verb unfolding in this way, consuming or being consumed, has a name. In esotericism, let me just jump over to that. We might, hopefully, the jumping around from window to window will stop soon as we settle in for. But we might have some of it because I have some slides prepared and so on. So you'll have to bear with me as we're jumping around a little bit technologically wise. But this is really important. This is fundamental. We're talking about the actual fundamental foundations of reality and how reality functions, how the universe functions, how God experiences himself, and therefore the fundamental nature of your experience, my experience, and the experience of all living things and all phenomena in the universe. Now, you know about the alm of life. That's the process of evolution and devolution. We've gone over that many times, but this law supersedes or is fundamental. It is foundational to the alm of life. The alm of life couldn't exist without it because of this law, which I'm about to write out for you. It is I always forget what order this goes in. It's the common cosmic Trogoautoegocrat Law. Normally I do everything in all caps, but I needed this to fit on the screen. The Trogoautoegocrat Law. That's a crazy name. But this is the law that states that this is the law of another way of a more crude way of expressing this is we can say it's the dynamic of creation and destruction. Okay? But this is actually creation and destruction is subservient. We will get to creation and destruction. This is too this is too soon. There's something more fundamental here, and that is I made a crude joke in the description today's live stream because it was Valentine's Day and because we're going to be talking about love. Right? To swallow or be swallowed. Okay? To consume or be consumed. Now, if you consider this just for a moment, just on our level of reality, we know that there are creatures that consume other creatures. And we also know that even the mightiest hunter, the mightiest predator, when it dies, its body is going to dissolve and is going to be consumed by other biological organisms. This is all very succinctly explained in The Lion King when Mufasa says to Simba, and is describing to Simba the great circle of life. Well, the great circle of life is an ouroboros, because the lions eat the gazelle, but then when the lions die, they dissolve into the earth, and from the earth grows the grass that the gazelles eat. So it's the great circle of life, as Mufasa explains it to Simba. But this fundamental dynamic between positive and negative forces, active and passive, predator and prey, affirming and negating, expressive and receptive. This dynamic is operational and functional on all levels of creation. There's no creation without it. It is the metaphysical and physical scientific expression of fluidity, of fluency, that we described last week as being fundamental, because fluency refers to mastery of language, mastery of words, and how words flow together one after another to create meaning. To create meaning. Without fluency, you have gibberish. You have nonsense. You have chaos. There's no meaning. It's you cannot reconcile someone that is speaking incoherently. There's no coherence. So in the exchange of consuming or being consumed, we have this flow, this pendulum swing, if you will, between these two states of consuming or being consumed, or both happening simultaneously. Now, what's interesting is how this dynamic plays out in relation to these other words down here: creation and destruction. We can use other words like birth and death. But before there can be a birth, before there can be a creation, these two forces, the Trogoautoegocratic law, these two forces must combine. If you say that one of these is affirming and one force is negating, the holy affirmation, the holy negation, then a third force must emerge. And that third force is the reconciliating force. My spelling is terrible. Reconciliating or reconciliation. In terms of mathematics or physics, depending on how you want to look at this, you have positive negative, and neutral. These are the three forces. So this third aspect, this is known as the holy Triamatsikano law, also known as the law of three, which we've talked about extensively. But I'm using these terms that I originally encountered these terms when I read Gurdjieff. But of course, Master Samael and many other esotericists refer to these. These are the official names of these laws: the Common-Cosmic Trogoautoegocrat Law, the Tria Matsikamno, and of course, the Law of Seven is the Heptapeta Parshanok, which we're not going to get into today, but that's the organizational law of the universe. The Law of Seven plus the Law of Three. 7 and 3 is 0. 7 and 3 is 10. And 10 is 1 and 0, which is the alpha and the omega, the origin and the infinity, which, because you can't have the origin and the infinity separate, we draw it like this. And now you have the positive and the negative. This is infinity, and it's also the Common-Cosmic Trogoautoegocrat Law. It's the alpha and the omega in one continuum. But the other way to draw that, of course, is the ouroboros. Wholly affirming, wholly negating. So that's why the number 10, base 10 mathematics, and it's the 1 and 0. It's why we design computers to think in binary terms, because mechanical nature is trapped by the cosmic Trogoautoegocrat law. It can only be swallowing or being swallowed. It's very difficult for mechanical nature to achieve that neutral state, that third state, because that third state, the reconciliation is the Trinity, the triunity of divinity. That's the power of creation itself. So mechanical nature tends to be on the pendulum between one or the other, between all duality and all opposites. Whereas, as I described previously and in my video on Human 3.0, the point for true human beings is to transcend that duality, to transcend the mechanicity of binary duality, of either or, into that space of reconciliation, where it is not either or, it is and ultimately neither, which is beyond the Tao, which is in the absolute. But we still have the fact this is the one law that unfolds into three laws, the Trinity, and then it unfolds into 6 laws and 12 laws and 24 laws into 48 laws, and so it gets complicated as we move further and further down, as creation becomes more and more complicated, as it becomes more and more dense. The denser reality becomes, the more laws are applied which constitute that density. It's complexity, it's complication that creates density. That's why in the I, in Klipoth, in hell, you see what happens here. The overcomplication of life, the overcomplication of reality, living in mechanical psychology and psychological hell, the lower you go, the more complicated everything becomes. And just look around you in the world today. Just look how complicated everything is, and how complication and overcomplication that seems to be like piling on one on top of another every day. You, right when you just think you got a handle on something, the next day there's something new monkey wrench thrown into the works, and everything goes to hell, and everything is completely made more complex, whether it's AI, whether it's the political situation in the United States or globally. Now there's like tensions building up between major superpowers, and it's like, and just try to get a straight answer anywhere nowadays. Everywhere you turn, people are saying different things. Everybody claims to know what's going on, but everybody has different versions of the truth, or what they claim to be the truth. And the internet was supposed to be this bastion of openness and transparency and information, and the internet has become a cesspool of misinformation and disinformation. And now there are services you can subscribe to, like Ground News, which supposedly will go through and analyze all the sources of information and all the sources of data out there, and then we'll give you a weighted average as to, well, these people are more conservative and these people are more liberal, and these people have connections to these businesses and these multinationals, and this is, and basically they're trying to analytically and statistically present you with information to allow you to gauge and try to make sense out of all of this complexity, just so you can begin to evaluate the credibility of the sources of the information. You haven't actually gotten to the information yet. You haven't actually read the news yet. All you're doing is reading about the so-called credibility of the sources of the news and their biases, or how biased they are, or how not biased they are. That's how complicated everything has gotten. It's good to keep in the back of your mind this chart, and that these laws represent that complication. Remember how simple it used to be, when we were kids? Your mom, maybe depending on how old you are, your mom would feed you breakfast on a Saturday. Maybe you watched Saturday morning cartoons. Maybe you got lunch, and then your mom would open the door and say, come back before it gets dark, or come back just after it gets dark. When the street lamps come on, come home when the street lamps come on. Come home for dinner when the street lights come on. That was Generation X. That's my generation. We were the free range generation. Our mothers would let us loose on a Saturday, Sunday afternoon, Sunday after church, or Saturday after lunch, and the entire afternoon we just roamed free, and we did what we wanted to do, what we were able to do, or what we found able to do. And life was so simple. We just had to be, the street lights came on. Oh, okay, got to go home now. It was simple. And just now, parents are terrified to leave their kids unsupervised. They have to go with them to the park. They have to be supervised 24/7 because they're terrified of their kids being stolen, or God only knows, happening to them. And that's here in first world countries in the West. And all of this fear, all of this determinism, all of these are like forms of coercion, right? These laws, these rules. But they're rules that are being imposed on us by mechanical nature. That's really an aside. That's really an aside. But because love is free will and freedom is inherent to love, it's selfless. Love does not impose itself. Only the ego does that. Only mechanicity does that. Machines impose, right? Mechanical, these are the laws of mechanical nature that are imposed upon us. So that here, if you jump off a bridge, you're going to fall. It's called the law of gravity. It's a law. And there are many other laws. And the further you get into hell, including psychological hell, the more and more mechanical laws are imposed upon you. And we see that in the world, in wokeness, for example, or in the global elite, in the security state, all of these other things that are expressing themselves in the world. These are expressions in the physical world of these laws which exist in the metaphysical world, in hell, in psychological hell. And they are now expressing themselves in the kingdom, in Malkut. But all of that is largely antithetical to what we're talking about today, which is love. And this notion of consume and be consumed. But you will note as we talk about this, as we discuss this. Last week, I was showing you the dynamic. I should make that bigger here. All of these words and how they relate to each other. But what was interesting here was the dynamic between the desire for affluence and fluency and affluence and desire, and how the fallen humanity happens when hesitancy and fluency are exchanged, where the fear of confluence and surrender to the higher self and the desire to control and the harnessing of fluency. This is when I talked 2 weeks ago about power versus strength. This is the inversion of the upright human being into the downturned demonic being, the mechanical being, where substance and circumstance are what matter, and the desire to control that. Now, when you look at the difference between this slide, this dynamic, you guys got to tell me when it's not on screen. Share screen, where is it? Okay. So when we were good gravy, why is that not fixing? Okay. So the upright, okay, so that's the I don't know why this thing's not working properly. Okay, so the upright human being has this dynamic where fluency, confluence, surrender, and desire, affluence. But then in the negative, we have the desire, right? Let's switch to pen. Yeah, I like the pen better. So this is this desire for affluence. So the desire for monetary affluence, what people call abundance. So money, power, fame, fortune, land, control, etc., empire building, etc. This affluence, but they want it, but it's the ego that desires it. So it's physical affluence. And in order to get it, like we talked about 2 weeks ago, people want their power and gain access to their power. And you hear people in spiritual groups talk about this all the time. You will all the time hear people talking about how to access your higher power and access your higher power. This is what they're talking about. They're talking about the inversion of power and strength and how to become a black magician, how to become a demon by harnessing your fluency in order to gain control over your life. And we went over this 2 weeks ago. But if you look carefully at the dynamic in the image, you discover that there is a consumption taking place. There is a swallowing and a being swallowed. Whereas under normal circumstances in the Tao, we have this dance, we have this interaction, of course. And in that interaction, but this interaction in and of itself, there's no consuming or being consumed. It's implied, but it's not visualized, it's not shown. To the act of the negative overcoming and taking over the positive. So, in other words, for one half to become the predator and the other half to be prey. So, in other words, the Tao is neutral. In other words, this is the law of three, because you have the Trogoautoegocratic law, the law of two, the duality, but it's in balanced union. This is like love itself. There's severity and mercy here. There's positive and negative, but there's neutral. As soon as the negative assumes the role of consumption, it is consuming, it is containing confluence and surrender and the sire, the being. And it is consuming, it is harnessing this fluency, and it is sucking it in and using it to empower, influence, and its ability to render or manifest its desires for affluence. This is you can just visualize it, how the blue is containing so much of the what orange? I don't know what you would call that. Is it pink? Is it orange? I don't know. But it's the blue is containing this, and then here the orange is being again contained by, it's being sucked down and used up. For what? For the sake of this affluence. So there's a consumption taking place. The orange, the energy, the power, the fluency, and the light is being consumed by the darkness. And this is humanity. right? This is what happens. This is when we get inverted, because the lower half, the animal half, is now pointing up. We're an inverted human being. We're pointing downwards. Our fluency, everything is going down. It's going down the drain for the sake of control, for the sake of fear. Fear is ruling. So this is out of balance. But all of the elements are still there, because ultimately the universe cannot be out of balance. So the balance is there, and yet it's not. Why isn't it? Because there are aspects which are effectively asleep, which are being contained. And because they're being contained, they're ineffectual in a practical sense. But of course, they have influence of their own kind. But what influence is that? What is the goal? We have to go back to the beginning and talk about verses, and verse and adversity leading to verses, stories, heroic stories, stories of victory, of heroism. Well, what is that? What are you talking about? How does that come to pass? Well, if villainy, if evil, if you will, if the darkness gets the upper hand through this process of consumption, of swallowing up the light, then to restore order, to restore balance, a reverse process has to take place where the darkness becomes hunted and the light seeks to consume the darkness. And out of that consumption, whereas before the light was being consumed, now it becomes a consumer. But of course, you can see how that fact itself has been hijacked by the Black Lodge, has been hijacked by the forces of darkness, by the forces of mechanicity. Whereas you and I and everybody in the world are consumers. We're consumers, right? So you can be hypnotized and be made to feel like you are doing your duty, what you are supposed to do, what you are meant to do in the world, by being a consumer. And what are you consuming? You're consuming goods and services. And goods and services are material. You're consuming that material, right? And it feels good to do it. And your congressman and your president or your prime minister tells you that it's good. It's good for the economy. It's good for the GDP. It's good for jobs. It's good for the community. It's capitalism, right? It's good. Be a good consumer. It's more important in this day and age to be a good consumer than it is to be a good citizen. And so many people do it. We all do it. We're all guilty. And why is it so compelling to be a consumer of darkness, of matter, of physicality, of physical things, of things? And some people do more than just consume. Some people hoard. They consume more than they can actually consume. And why is it so compelling? It's because of the Common-Cosmic Trogoautoegocrat Law, the law of two. There's only two states that you can be in: to eat or be eaten, to consume or be consumed. Now, nobody wants to be consumed, right? Right? You don't want to be eaten alive. You don't want to be decimated. You don't want the communists to come and take all your stuff away, your house, your car, all of your belongings, because that's what communists do. That's what communism is. If those who have supposedly end up giving to those who have not, but that's bullshit. What happens is those who have end up giving their nicest stuff to those who also have, but now are going to have even more. I know this because I had parents who lived through communism and lived through the what communism did, and so on. But let's not get bogged down into politics. Let's just recognize that there's only two states in mechanical nature: to eat or be eaten, and that these two halves of this law of the Trogoautoegocrat is the ouroboros. The universe is constantly in this never-ending exchange of energy, giving or taking. This is the only two states. This is love. This is how the selflessness expresses. Because in order to create, one must be able to take in and transform what one has taken in into something new. That's the process of creation in the Triamatzikamno, the law of three. Affirming and affirmation and negation, and the reconciliation of the two. So to be a consumer is to be a predator. That's why capitalism is so masculine. To consume is to accumulate. And that, again, feeds, pardon the pun, feeds directly into this material. Oh, I forget that this is not my whiteboard, and that erase doesn't work that way. Close enough. So the fluency, the power that they draw, divine power, like the manifestation of desires, in order to manifest abundance in their life. That's the affluence in the material world that they wish to consume, to accumulate. That's the predatory instinct. And it is interesting that they refer to themselves as producers, and they refer to us as consumers. Because of the way the dynamic is set up, and we're going to get into some of that with a little bit more clarity now, because this being consumed and consuming well, let's not get into that yet. Let me finish off this part. So the energy, the divinity, the power within is consumed and contained by the darkness. So we need to reverse that. But the consumption, the way we get trapped is the darkness, the Black Lodge has made us all consumers, and consumers of darkness, consumers of material goods. And that archetypally placates us. It makes us comfy and secure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing just by being good consumers. But what we are really supposed to be doing is consuming that which has hijacked our fluency. The forces of influence and of desire within ourselves. And the beauty is that the grift that the Black Lodge has pulled on us, right, is that, yeah, it's harnessed our energy, and it's siphoning our energy, it's siphoning our power. But in order for it to be able to do that, it has to go through this process of influencing us and rendering its desires for material abundance. You see, it's constantly, through hypnosis and ignorance, trying to get us to continually give ourselves to its desires. And we freely do so. Over and over and over again. We let it happen. And that's because it's easier to fall than it is to rise. The easy path to the wide gate to hell, and there are many who walk it, Matthew said. The path, the road is wide. Sorry, the road is easy, the path is easy, and the gate is wide. So this huge gaping hole that our fluency, our energy, and our consciousness can just naturally, by the force of gravity, just falls into. But to do the reverse, it's a very narrow window of opportunity. And the path is very difficult. Now we think about the life of a grazing animal, a pasture animal, on the Serengeti or wherever, doesn't matter. He's in a herd, follows the herd, he eats the grass. There's practically an unlimited amount of food. And all day, every day, prey animals basically graze. They basically just are constantly eating or sleeping or doing what they do, standing around, walking around. It is not a particularly strenuous, their ability. It's a much more passive activity, grazing, than it is for, say, a predator. Now, a predator, like cats, for example, sleep 23 hours of the day anyway. But in order for a cheetah, for example, to catch a gazelle, think about the difficult path and the wide gate for a moment. The gazelle has a 360-degree arc that it can run in. Let me try to help you visualize this, if I may. Let's just move this up here for a second, right? You have a gazelle. This is a terrible rendition of a gazelle, but you have a gazelle. And then you have I'm not even going to try drawing the cheetah. You know what? Let's do it this way. You have a gazelle and you have a cheetah. Now, in the grand scheme of things, the cheetah has one very narrow, very short window of opportunity. A window of opportunity. The gazelle, to get away, has, right, 360 degrees of choice, of direction that it can run in. And if it's a rabbit or any other animal or a squirrel evading a cat of any kind, right? And maybe that's even a better, instead of saying cheetah, let's say prey, and let's just call that a cat. Not predator, because you'll have two P's and then it'll be confusing. And that prey, it can zigzag, right? It can go up trees. It can, and if it's part of a herd, the whole herd, it can get the whole herd running, like in fish in a school of fish. It has so many opportunities to avoid the predator, in this case, the cheetah, the cat. But the predator has one target. He has to hit that target. He has to catch that one prey. So if the prey evades in a certain direction, the cheetah doesn't have a choice of which direction he's going to go. He's got to follow his prey. He's got to hone in and zone in on his prey. So negativity, the negative has it easy to consume or to evade consumption. The positive, the predator, has it hard and a very narrow window of opportunity. Predators lose their prey, or they fail to catch what they're chasing more often than they're successful. Or another example of this is a spider weaves a spider web. The spider sits there, and the spider can sit there for days and days and days and days, waiting for something to fall into its web. And when it does, it has that very narrow band of opportunity. But the spiders is entirely subject to circumstance. Why do I mention this? Why do I bring this up? Because that which is fluid, fluency, flows down and out, goes down the drain much easier than it goes up. Rivers flow down. Toilets go down the drain. Sinks go down the drain. We all know about being down and out and how things spiraling downward. It's gravity. It's this law we're talking about. 1 and 2. 2 is greater than 1. It is heavier. It is denser. 1 is always going to gravitate towards 2. Do you get it? It has to. 2 has more gravity. 2 is double 1. It's twice as wide. It's twice as easy to go downhill than it is to go uphill. At least, right? At least twice as easy. This is important to note. Why? Because it's designed this way. The Trogoautoegocratic Law works by these definitions. It has to. That's why to fall is easier and practically natural. We have to fight against it. But what if we are already fallen? Then what? Benjamin Ochoa asks, the upside down man is symbol for going against the flow, or life is upside down backwards? No. He's fallen. He's fallen. He's going down. He's going head first down. He's going with the flow down. Just like here, the flow is going down, right? Remember in the, let me just go back for here for a second. So Benjamin, you have to remember that when we were this way, okay, the light was flowing up. And then when you reverse it and fear, hesitancy is on top, now the darkness is coming up and the light is flowing down. And it's flowing down and out. It's flowing down into, and this is why the upright man who was upright is now upside down, because he's pointed down. His feet, his sexual organs, his lust, his desire is pointing up. It's now the crown. It is what is controlling confluence and surrender and sire, and to give birth and to rule over physical affluence through influence and render and desire. But we can reverse this. And how do we reverse this? By becoming predators. By allowing ourselves to be prey to the Black Lodge, to the darkness, to become consumers, but not in the way that the Black Lodge wants us to be consumers. Like all predators, we have to observe. We have to use the influence, the fluency that's available to us. I'm going to make this bigger. I can see if I can. Okay. So the influence that the Black Lodge has over us, we must transform into conscience. So where the Black Lodge, the desire and the hesitancy has influence over us and over our fluency, we must instead listen to our conscience. The still soft voice. Jiminy Cricket. Remember Pinocchio? Pinocchio has Jiminy Cricket. Jiminy Cricket is the voice of his conscience. Because when Pinocchio listens to the other characters in the story, he gets exploited, right? He gets used and abused. And he ends up falling. But to be a real boy, he must listen to Jiminy Cricket. He must listen to his conscience. Now, the ego's desires to manifest, to render their desires, instead of rendering our desires, which is giving into them, which is making our desires become true, indulging our desires, we must comprehend our desires. So we listen to our conscience, we observe our desires, and we comprehend how those desires render themselves. How do they render control? How do they cause our suffering and others' suffering? How do they achieve their goals? How do they play with us? How do they manipulate with us? We need to comprehend how they render. And last but not least, once we've comprehended the desires and how they go about causing ourselves and others suffering, we can dissolve them. And when we dissolve the desires, the egos, now we give rise to the quintessence. And we can restore fluency to its rightful place. Now, when you observe here, right, we have consumed the egos. And in doing so, we have created through the consumption. That's transmutation. That's the Trogoautoegocratic law plus the law of three. We've created something new. In other words, we have the emergence of the quintessence. Let me get my, where did my pen go? We have the emergence of the quintessence. And we have the convergence of an instance. Before we had emergence and divergence, but now we have a coming together, a convergence. A convergence of what? The mortal, the fallen human being who undergoes this process to consume instead of being consumed, and give birth to the quintessence and restore order. And I have not completed all the animations on this slide, so the discard. So these two guys should be these two guys. You know, I was working on this stuff right up until the last minute, and then I had my microphone issues. So, okay. So when we talk about the, whereas before we were divergence and divergence through resistance and divergence through the instance, we now have right side up. But now we have not only true human being, but we have mastery. And we have the emergence of the quintessence, because we have dissolved the ego. And the positive and negative have been restored, but transformed. This is the master. This is the hero who has overcome and restored balance. by that which was formerly consumed, right? This is how, you know, we begin, if you will. But then we fall. So the process to restore is not to get back to the status quo. You can't go backwards. You can only go forward. This can only revolve forward. So from the fallen human being, conscience, comprehension, dissolution of the ego, and the restoration of the upright human being. Oh, it still doesn't want to work. Why not? Why not? Oh, I know why not. There. Okay. There. So when we go through this process, now we restore not just the order of things, but we've now overcome. We've grown. The emergence of the quintessence. This is the verses. These are the verses that are born. The new verses that are born through the act of having gone through this process of falling and rising again. But we have risen now to a higher state than we were when we began. This is the universe unfolding knowledge of itself. But the Tao maintained, the balance is maintained. And the process is maintained, and it is all because of the Trogoautoegocrat Law, or the law of two and the law of three. Because the law of two unfolds into the law of three. We're really talking about the reconciliation is not a restoration to the old. The reconciliation is the emergence, the creation of the new, of the different, of the better. This is evolution. This is the process that we describe as the Alm of Life, where you descend into hell and you conquer so that you can ascend, but when you ascend, you're at a higher level than you were when you began. This is the foundation. This is love. This is the foundation of love. This is the nature of love. Without resistance, without an obstacle, for love to conquer. You know that expression, love conquers all? Without something to conquer, love is stagnant. And without something to challenge love, to have that love tested. And how do you deepen your love? How do you strengthen your love? If not by having it challenged, if not by having it tested, if not by putting it through the dark night of the soul. And those tests can come in many, many forms, in many, many shapes and sizes. if not having the darkness come and swallow up that love for a time. And this whole concept of being swallowed, like Jonah and the whale, and it's also, there's also the Leviathan also plays a huge part in the story of I'm just drawing a blank on the name. Benjamin. Where's Benjamin when I need him? Job, the book of Job. So the Leviathan, the big fish, the big whale, also consumes Job, that he has to escape from. So being consumed, being swallowed up by a great beast is a symbol that is throughout the Bible, for instance, including the book of Revelations, where the great beast comes, and they refer to the beast, and the number of the beast is 666. And what is this, right? If not the when we talk about what is this, if not the great six? And when the beast swallows you up, right, there's this inversion that takes place, and we go from a 9, an upright 9, to a downward 6, because the light, which used to be a 9, is now pointed downwards, and it's a 6. And if we become a 6 in our mind, in our heart, in our body, we are 666. That's the number of the beast. Well, but as you can see, we are being consumed. Our energy is being consumed. Our consciousness is being consumed. It's flowing down the drain. It's being bottled up inside of what? Inside of influence, inside of this rendering of desire for physical affluence. And our self, our higher self, and our ability to have confluence and to surrender for our higher self is consumed by hesitancy and is obscured by the effluence that is contaminating our waters, our sexual waters. Master Samael, when he talks about the Trogoautoegocrat Law, refers to the water on the planet. Water, as you know, is essential for life. And water is obviously very fluid. And we know that water is a conductor. Water it dissolves and it crystallizes. It is a catalyst for every conceivable biological, chemical, and biochemical, electrochemical process that takes place on the planet. This is why when astronomers look for life on other planets, they're looking for liquid water. That's what they're looking for. If they can find traces or signs of liquid water, they mark that planet or that asteroid or that body in the heavens as possible place where life can be, because we don't know. We are not aware of any chemistry where life can exist without water, or at least not an abundance of life, not an ecosystem of life. And it's that fluency, it's that fluidity, because there's fire in that water. There's energy in that water. Water is a conductor of energy. It's a conductor of electricity. It's a phenomenal conductor of electricity. And electricity, as you know, comes in positive and negative polarities. All energy, all matter, all phenomena in the universe must obey the Trogoautoegocrat law. The great ouroboros. The universe is consuming itself, and in the process of that consumption, is growing bigger, has growing more gnosis, more self-evident experiential knowledge. The verses, the stories, the verses, the word, the living, breathing word of God. This is why I've said, how many times have I said, like a broken record, the living, breathing word of God is all around you and within you. It's in the great, pardon me for a second while I get this here. It's in the great university of life. It's in the great university of existence, where the unconditioned verb is swallowed up by the adversary and is conditioned and subjected to all of the adverbs, all of the adversity. And in order to free itself from that conditioning, from the conditioning of, and the control and the hesitancy and the insistence, the determinism of the mechanical adversity and the mechanical adversary, it must use novelty, a combination of its nature, its true nature, the verb, the verse, its integrity, but applied in a new and novel way, in accordance with what is necessary given the circumstances and allowing for what must be, an acceptance of what is. And in that, the acceptance of circumstance and the novel application of verse in order to overcome the adversity inherent to that circumstance, verses are born. New, never before heard verses, like new, never before played music. And it is that crucible that is the university of life that gives rise, that gives birth to the universe itself. The universe is born of the university. And the university consists of the verse, the adversary, adversity, and the verses that overcome. But remember when we were talking about the cheetah and the gazelle, or the predator and the prey, it requires incredible focus and concentration. It is a narrow path. It is a difficult, narrow path to hit the bullseye, to hit the target, to chase down that prey. The prey is elusive. The prey has a 360-degree arc. Excuse me. In order for us to be able to consume that which enslaves us, to transform ourselves from prey to predator, requires incredible focus and concentration and integrity. Because this capacity, the capacity of conscience, the quality of consciousness, and the ability to comprehend and dissolve the affluence or abundance of negativity within us, the effluence, into the quintessence. We must work with our fluency in an upright, positive way. We mustn't, because at any point in time, we are being tempted to flow down and out on the easy path through the wide gate, because that's the nature of 2 versus 1. Very briefly, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is in the act of creation. We have a very interesting phenomenon, because typically what I just described in the predator-prey scenario, you have a predator and its prey. This is typically considered masculine or positive, and the prey is considered negative, feminine or negative. In fact, well, okay, we can't really avoid this for this discussion, so let's do this and this. Okay. And that's sort of outlined, right? However, this is where death is concerned. Because a predator consuming its prey, the prey is going to die. The predator is living, but the predator is not technically creating anything. The predator is maintaining what he already has through this process. But when you look at actually creating, and you have the masculine, the male, and a female, this is also positive, and this is also negative. So in this scenario, I should say the predator consumes the prey for death. But when we talk about insemination, in other words, the process that leads to birth, to creation, you can say the male inseminates the female. Sure. But we're interested in this word. The masculine is consumed by the female. Yeah, I should probably fix that. Whoops. Let's be do you see that? Before we continue, we got a comment from Benjamin here. Benjamin says, now I understand. Let's see. Now I understand your point about consuming the prey. It brings to mind a passage from the Gospel of Thomas. Blessed is the lion that becomes human when consumed by a human. and cursed is the human whom the lion consumes, and the lion becomes human. Lion that becomes human when consumed by a human. Yeah, okay. And cursed is the human whom the lion consumes, and the lion becomes human. Yeah, so there's much depth of meaning in that particular dynamic, but basically that's kind of describing what you've been describing. Blessed is the lion. Blessed is the ego that is transmuted and becomes conscious when consumed by a human being, and cursed is the human who is that the ego consumes, and that the ego masquerades as being human. But that's exactly the dynamic, right? That I've illustrated using this modified Tao. And not only is it a modified Tao, let's be clear, right? It's a more complicated Tao. It's more complicated. This is simple. This is simple. But this adds a layer of complexity. Like when we are going into hell and we are subject to more laws. This is what is being shown here when there's an inversion. This is the lion eating the human that Benjamin shared from the Gospel of Thomas. This is the lion eating the human, right? This is the human that becomes an animal. Why? Because the animal takes precedence over the human being. So because let's face it, everybody in the planet believes that they're human beings. They're all egos. They're all intellectual animals. They all think they're human beings, but they're not human beings. They're egos masquerading as human beings. They're demons. They're mechanical entities pretending to be human. Benjamin Ochoa says, it reminds me of an Indian saying, it's better to aim at a lion and miss than to aim at a jackal and kill it. That's another interesting version of this particular phenomenon. And Benjamin Raphael says, the upside down human in your illustration is similar to the hanging man in the tarot. Yes. Yeah. I use this image because it works so nicely with the Vitruvian man. And the colors are the same and everything. And then I invert him and then he becomes half cyborg when he's inverted, right? I prefer this image because the hanged man has so many other implications. And when you start using archetypes from the tarot, people get all kinds of stuff in their head. Like if they've been going to fortune tellers and everybody, like so many people have so many different interpretations of that particular card and what the hanged man means. But a fallen half cyborg Vitruvian man, I think is there's no baggage there. And there's no misinterpretation, or at least I hope not. But so then the point then is we must become like predators and then, reverse that. But coming back to what I was on about here. Yeah, she said, yeah, the illustration of the cyborg is perfect, especially for our time. Yeah, especially now we're on the verge of AI and transhumanism and all that garbage, all that nonsense. So, so just coming back to this, where death is concerned, the predator, the masculine, right? The affirmation, positive, masculine, whatever, consumes negation. The reconciliation of the two is death, and life, that death, destruction that preserves life. But it only preserves life, or sustains is a better word. Okay, sustains life. Let's make this a little. Sustains, and then let me get my eraser. Sustains life. Okay, but in the second scenario, affirmation is consumed by negation in order to, right, create life. Now, this is an interesting phenomenon. If this is not pointed out, one might think that the masculine always consumes. Always consumes. But in fact, the most important role that the male, the masculine, plays is to be consumed by. To be consumed by. So, no matter how you slice it, consume. So, there's always an aspect that is being consumed by. One is being consumed by the other. And we have a word for that esoterically, especially in relation to love. And keep in mind that when we want to, if we get down to the nitty gritty of all of this, you can't have birth without death, which is why the male aspect, the seed, has to die. If you have, as soon as something is consumed, it dies. And it's transformed into something else. So in the case of the sperm and the egg, the sperm dies. And we have another word for that, of course, in esotericism. And that word is sacrifice. In our dynamic here, we show that there must be a dissolution. And it appears as though this dissolution, this consumption, is being done by the masculine to the feminine. And it's true because we're talking about the negative aspects of ego that are being transmuted into positive aspects of the quintessence, the consciousness, the being, the monad, and beyond. Right? The upright human being, etc., etc., etc. But siring the quintessence means that both of these are taking place simultaneously. And that's why because death, and there's also the other aspect is that coming back to the scene from The Lion King, when the lions die, their bodies become the grass. So the predator is now consumed by a different kind of prey. It's not really prey. So there's this constant inversion of roles between predator and prey, being consumed and consumed by. We mustn't fall into the binary trap of saying, well, this guy is patriarchal and he says all males are predators, or whatever. That's typical patriarchy. Or see, he just proved wokeness because all these feminists and transgenderists and everybody, they're all against the patriarchy because the patriarchy is always predatory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? That's binary thinking. That's binary thinking. Trinary thinking, the reconciliation of these two aspects, is shown right here. Where death is concerned, or where life is concerned for the predator. But then, when it comes time for the predator to die, essentially the predator becomes prey. The roles are reversed. That's the lesson that's in the Tao, is that which is positive becomes negative, and that's which is negative that becomes positive, because they contain one another. They are one another. They're undifferent. There are in fact simply differentiated versions of one another. This is why we say two sides of the same coin. You spin the coin, is it heads or tails? When you're spinning the coin, it's at any given moment, it's heads or tails or both, or neither. This is the ultimate nature of that one law, of that severity and mercy that we describe in the Tao. And if you visualize the Tao revolving, but then you also see it in the dynamic that I've shown of being swallowed by, and then swallowing that which has just swallowed you, consuming that you have just been swallowed by. Well, that's the ouroboros. That's the serpent consuming its own tail. And the serpent, as you know, is very profound symbol in esotericism, is the Divine Mother. Because we know for a fact that creation happens through the female, and that the male, the affirming, the masculine, is consumed by the female in order to give birth. The sperm enters the egg. The sperm dies. The egg lives, continues, and is transformed by the additive qualities of the affirming qualities of the masculine that become embedded within it. The egg becomes a zygote, and it begins the process of involution. And if you don't know what involution is, it is the phenomenon whereby a single cell undergoes the miraculous process of cell division, but within its contained body. So the zygote doesn't multiply this way like a bacteria would, or like a mold or a fungus. No, the zygote separates like this, and then those two become four, and then those four become 8, and so on and so on. Now, obviously, this is going to get bigger, right? As more and more the cell division continues, and more cells are created. This thing is going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then those cells are going to begin differentiating themselves. But you know how big these things can get and how differentiated they become. And after 9 months, when a woman's so-called water breaks, you know what's actually taking place there? What's actually going on is the intracellular fluid from the original zygote, from the original cell, the original egg, the yolk of that original egg, right? Intracellular fluid Let's not forget the importance of that fluid, that fluency. When the water breaks, it's that intracellular fluid. It's when the outer wall of what we now call the placenta breaks, and the yolk of the original egg of the woman flows out. Because of course, by this point, I'm not going to sit here and by this point, it's a fetus. It's not just a fetus, it's a baby about to be born. But that's a process of involution. That's one egg dividing and going through the process of differentiation until a whole new entity, a whole new being is formed and born within the confines of that single cell, that single egg. It's a phenomenal miracle, right? It's an extraordinary process that science cannot begin to understand. But that's what we call a woman's water breaking, and the placenta that or what they call the afterbirth, right? It's the afterbirth, but it's the pre-insemination. It's irony. It's irony. It's the first thing in and the last thing to go. Yeah. So the importance of recognizing that the flow as it relates to love, as it relates to creation, selflessness, positivity, affirmation, it just gives. Or it, in the case of the predator, it takes. But it needs to do that in order to sustain life. And if you notice, predators in the wild, they, generally speaking, don't consume more than they need. And what do they need that energy for most? It's for procreation. It's to create, it's to sustain the species, to pass along their genes to the next generation, etc. And in that process of creation, the male is consumed, or at least a great deal of energy. What we want to be clear on and recognize is that when it comes to love, and specifically sexuality wants the energy to flow like it does here, down and out, consumed by lust, consumed by this is stupid. So what flows within us, that sexual energy, that sexual force, that is the creative power. But what is it creating? Is it creating, through the influence and the rendering of desires, is it creating affluence for desires in physicality and is it creating the methodology by which we are further hypnotized, i.e. desire, i.e. lust? Because if the energy flows down and out negatively, it's just going to create more lust, more opportunities to be under the influence. Because in the act of creation, that creative force, that creative energy is consumed. But it can be consumed by the light, or it can be consumed by the darkness. And the thing about the light is that because it's the narrow way, it's very focused and concentrated. You can, for example, conceive a child without having an orgasm. Mechanical nature demands the orgasm because it's going to inseminate that egg through the randomness of mechanicity. Because that influence is what's there in mechanical nature to force is not the right word. Encourage procreation. It's a drive. It's a primal urge to procreate. That's what function lust serves in mechanical nature, what desire serves in mechanical nature. That abundance, that affluence of DNA and spreading one's genes, spreading one's gene pool, having abundance of offspring. But to have a divinely inseminated child, in other words, a child who is inseminated by the power of the Holy Spirit, you only need one sperm. And that sperm is selected by the higher powers. While you're practicing white tantra with your spouse, if you are meant to have a divinely inseminated, immaculately conceived child, then the Holy Spirit will choose one sperm from the male to make that journey to the egg, to fecundate the egg. And I believe I've shared this many, many times. I have a cousin in Hungary who's a very ardent Catholic. And she and her husband strictly follow the Catholic edicts around things like contraception. And they have not used contraception ever. What they use is a so-called pull-out method of birth control. And I've told you guys this story many times. They have 7 children. 7 children using the pull-out method of birth control. Well, isn't that proof enough? And how many health counselors or sex counselors or whatever these people are called will tell you that the pull-out method of birth control is the most unreliable method there is. So even materialist science and medicine knows that a child can be conceived without an orgasm, or at least without the orgasm taking place inside of the woman, right? Well, that means that the orgasm is not necessary to conceive children. It is a scientific fact. This is not mumbo jumbo, woo-woo stuff. It's just a fact that if you can inseminate a woman without having an orgasm inside of her, then that means you can inseminate your wife without having an orgasm at all. This is just a fact. Scientific, objective, provable. There are countless children who are born this way. And sadly, probably many, many, many more who are aborted or have been aborted in the past because of, high school kids who, thought that the pull-out method was an effective way of birth control. The point here is that energy, the energy of our fluency, is precious and not to be wasted. Just like the energy of our love, the energy of our consciousness, our fluency. But we know it's just a fact that for many people, especially in this day and age, for example, even when they're speaking, it's easier, or it's so easy for swear words to flow, filthy language, obnoxious language, sarcasm. For many people, sarcasm flows like a river. It's like they can't express anything if it's not expressed in some kind of sarcastic form. Other people express everything in negatives. And if you observe your self-talk in the voices in your head, you might find just how negatively inverted, filthy the fluency is within you. And it's, as I described before, because 2 is twice what 1 is. So the 1 is always going to flow towards the 2. And for the 1 that is entrapped in the 2, to escape the 2 and return, must undertake the process of the law of 3, which is death and birth and sacrifice. But the 2 is not going to give itself up. The Black Lodge, mechanical nature, it is inherently fearful in nature. Its hesitancy is its nature. And it does not give up without a fight. So we mustn't be naive. We mustn't think that this process of transformation is easy, or that fluency that we seek to restore to its rightful place, that it's going to just flow up an atom all by itself. It takes super efforts for water to flow uphill. It takes a tremendous focus of concentration. But there's a pull. Like one of the easiest ways to get water, one of the easiest ways to get water to flow up is to put it in a really, really, really narrow tube. And the force of water tension and the electromagnetic field will draw that water naturally up. This is how water flows up plants and even giant sequoias in California that are over 1,000 feet tall or hundreds of feet tall. But the water flows, and the plant can draw the water up through the not vesicles. What are they called? They're not veins. They're not vesicles. I can't remember what they're called. But the equivalent of like blood vessels, but they're just drawing water, and they're drawing water up from the roots, and they can go hundreds of feet up into the air because the microtubules, are so narrow. So when we talk about the narrow path, the difficult path and the narrow gate, we can think about it in those terms. We can think about it in the terms of the cheetah chasing down the gazelle. The gazelle has a million different ways it can go, but the cheetah only has one way it can go. And this is the very truth and nature of love, that the effort that it takes, we must never neglect the effort, the focus, the energy It doesn't mean that it needs to be, but we want to balance and not fall into the trap of discipline. It should be effortless. It should come naturally. And this is very paradoxical, and this is very difficult perhaps to grasp, certainly for the mind, and say, well, how can you say I have to put all this effort and energy and focus and concentration into it, but then say it has to be effortless and come naturally? How do you square those two? How do you square those two things? And I hate to keep coming back to this, but this is just keeps yielding more and more and more good stuff. Because we started way back when talking about confluence and surrender. The source of love is inside of you. The source of love is your higher self, who simply wants to give birth to that love through you, through the quintessence, into the world. All you have to do is let it. All you have to do is surrender. And when you surrender, the only effort you need to put into is dissolving your egos, acting from your conscience, and your conscience comes from your higher self. All you got to do is comprehend your egos and dissolve your egos and hold back with your conscience and your comprehension, dissolution, hold back your fear. All you need is the courage to let go, to surrender, and to allow, to accept and to allow. And love will flow like a river, and you will become fluent in the truth and nature of love, and you will become a conduit for it in the world. It may take time for you to get there. I'm not there. I'm not there yet. But this is the goal. The goal is to not return to some equilibrium. Where we started. The goal is just like in every hero's journey is to return to where we started, but the place has changed because we have changed. We are more than what we were, much more, because we are less of what was preventing us, of what was preventing us from being who we truly are and who we were born to become. And this is where you have things like the Baphomet symbol and the words solve et coagula, to dissolve and to coagulate, to form, to bring into form, to shape, to dissolve and to crystallize. Well, we're talking about the crystallization of the quintessence through the dissolution of the ego. But we're speaking about it in the context of the Common-Cosmic Trogoautoegocrat Law, the law of two. In the beginning was the word, the verb and the adverb, and the cosmic dance between these two phenomena, between masculine and feminine. This is the This is why when we talk about the quintessence, this is where the concept of quintessential comes from. The quintessential truth and nature of love, the quintessential law of love, is the relationship between sacrifice and being sacrificed, swallowed and being swallowed, consuming and being consumed, affirming and negating, birth and death, creation and destruction. It's the Trogoautoegocratic Law and the Trianatsi-Kamno, or the Law of Three. It is the positive and negative, their interaction, and the negative consuming the positive so that the positive can consume what was consuming it in order to grow and become something new, novel, and greater than what it was before it was consumed in the first place. The fall and the rise and the fall, that's in the Alm of Life that we've talked about at great length so many times. The fall and the rise, and the evolution. And why, when you look up into the stars and you look through the Hubble telescope or the Webb telescope, right? You see billions and billions and billions of galaxies that are all shaped more or less like this. Spiral galaxies, millions of them, billions of them. The James Webb telescope, which is orders of magnitude more powerful than Hubble ever was, and it reveals all this. Why? Because this process has been going on forever, because time doesn't exist. There's only the now. But the swallowing up and being swallowed by, and this is how selflessness creates and gives for one purpose and one purpose alone, beyond having the opportunity to express itself, to be, to sacrifice and be sacrificed. In order to know itself, and all the myriad ways, the infinite ways in which selflessness can express. So how many different ways do you express your selflessness? And how many different challenges does your selflessness face, within and without? And how do you approach those challenges, those obstacles? And your fluency, how is your fluency? With the creative verb, sure, but in all the facets of your life. How do you employ the creative force? How does it flow within you and through you and out of you? Up and atom or down and out? Because there is no awakening, self-realization, and or ascension without grasping this in the fullest quintessential form, which is within us. Which is Not just our being, but the being of our being. The Christ, who is the verb. And that verb is love. Benjamin asks, have you heard of the new science? Scientist could now fecundate without the need of sperm. What do you think about that? It's an abomination. When you say that they can now fecundate without sperm, they just put in the male DNA? Whatever they're doing there, it's an abomination. It's an abomination. Benjamin Ochoa also says, Gurdjieff coined this word, Trogoautoegocrat. Do you believe that the fundamental purpose for the existence of humans is to serve as essential reconciling agents between value and matter? And he says, pretty cool, never heard of this word before. The purpose for the existence of humans is to reconcile. You know what? The way you put it, yeah, you could say it that way. But when we say reconcile, again, that reconciliation, we have to understand within the context of love what that reconciliation means. It means contributing to this. So it means going through this process. It means going through this process in order to restore, to reconcile, but to reconcile in such a way that the reconciliation gives birth to new verses, new chapters, new knowledge. And those verses are added to the great university of life, to the universe. So yes, we're here to serve as the crucibles for that process. Another way to understand this, and I've mentioned this before as well, in Greek mythology, there's a war between the heavens and the earth, and the Titans rule the earth. There's this war between the Titans and divinity, and when the Titans lose, when the Titans surrender, the gods of Olympus are born out of the Titans. And this is very significant. This is a profound symbol. So this is why the Christ is not only the Son of God, but he is also the Son of Man. This is exactly the same symbol as Zeus being born of a Titan. I can't remember which Titan he was born of. I can't remember the name. I'm so terrible with names. But the point is that the gods of Olympus were born out of the Titans when the Titans surrendered. And I believe you've seen those words being used recently on a dynamic that shows and why we have the expression that every demon was once an angel and every angel was once a demon. right? And why the redemption arc, the redemption story, is one of the most profound and meaningful and impactful stories or verses that exist in all of literature and all of scripture and all of mythology. The redemption story, the fall from grace and the return to grace. It's just no one has ever expressed it this way before. No one has ever shown this way in the Tao, using the Tao as standpoint, even though the Tao itself and the Taoists have all of these teachings are already there. It's already contained in the tradition, but they've never visualized it this way before. And this isn't perfect. This has a long way to go yet, but it's the foundation of something well, who knows what it's going to be, but anyway, it is what it is. That's what it is. What it is. Oh, you all vanished for a second. Okay, let's just take a moment to breathe and take a sip of water. I'll let you guys write any questions or comments about what we've talked about today. This is really taking love and the concept of severity and mercy, and the fact that love has those two pillars, that binary nature to it, but that severity and mercy at all times are in this dance. And it is that there's a direct one-to-one relationship between that, and in fact you could also say right, mercy and justice instead of severity, but that's just using a different word. And that it's that interplay between the two that embraces and encompasses both. And it doesn't matter how much romantic love exists in a relationship. If this fundamental understanding, comprehension of love as give and take isn't there, and that's why dancing is so powerful. It's so powerful an activity for lovers, for spouses especially. It doesn't matter if you know how to dance or don't know how to dance. It doesn't matter. But I'm talking about real dancing, where you embrace your spouse and you put on some beautiful music, quietly or loudly, it doesn't matter. And nobody needs to be watching. You don't have to be dressed up or go out to some place fancy, right? Just a couple moving together with the understanding that sometimes the male leads and sometimes he lets go of the reins and the female leads. And it's that give and take, and that you develop that with your partner, with your dance partner, who's your life partner. And you observe, the older you get together, the more incredible and beautiful you'll be able to dance together. And it'll be like one mind, one heart, one body. And because there's no pressure, it's just, you're just doing it for the pure enjoyment of oneness with the music, the harmony, the harmonization, and the give and take, the push and pull, the back and forth, but as one. If you have an opportunity with the one you love today or in the future, always remember that to dance with the one whom you love, your spouse, you are embodying the one law, the absolute law of the Trogoautoegocrat, the law of the universe, the law of the absolute, God's law. There's no better way in public anyway to experience oneness with God than through dancing with your spouse. I truly believe that. I've experienced it. And then the beauty about it is that it's not even, you can dance with your grandmother, you can dance with your spouse's mother or your spouse's father, and you can have such a profound experience, and it's purely platonic. It doesn't have to, it's not sexual. It doesn't have to be romantic. You can dance. That's why traditionally, when you went to a dance and you were even there with your spouse, it didn't matter. You could dance. I've danced with 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, and I've danced with 85-year-olds and 95-year-olds. There's no pretense. There's no expectation. There's no baggage. There's none of that. There's no ego. It's just enjoying a moment, but it's an intimate moment, but it's not sullied by any lust, by any envy or greed or pride, or there's no ego involved. It's just two people enjoying a dance. It is such a beautiful embodiment of the law of the Trogoautoegocrat, of these two opposites coming together and dancing, and it's beautiful. It's not filled with stress. It's not filled with anxiety. It's not filled with depression. It's not filled with, am I good enough? Am I not good enough? I mean, people who dance like that, they're the ones who are trying to remember the steps. Or they're judging the other person, saying, well, that's not how you hold someone in a tango. Or that's not the Argentinian tango. And I don't want that, and it's like, people who are all in their head when they dance, they don't know how to dance. They think they know how to dance, but they don't know how to dance. Or people who practice these dances, these show dancers, and that's a whole different kettle of fish. I'm talking about two people, two strangers, who just, one of them grabs the other one. There's a good dance, pulls his hand out. Would you like to dance? Yes? Okay. Takes him by the hand, takes him onto the dance floor, and they dance. No pretense, no expectation, no books, no steps, no nothing, just two people and the music. This are two human beings embodying the law of love. The Trogoautoegocratic law of the universe. I mean, if it was me, Valentine's Day would be a national holiday. It would be a day when everyone went to hockey rinks, bowling alleys, church, what do you call them? Church halls, right? Anywhere, basketball courts, stadium, anywhere. where music can be played and people can dance, but dance together, not jumping up and down, getting jiggy with it. No, no, no. For me, Valentine's Day would be a public holiday, and your civic duty would be to go and dance with your neighbors, with your coworkers, with your church parishioners, with with your fellow students, with your teachers, with your professors, with whomever. And this wouldn't be, I wouldn't make it a religious thing. It would be, in fact, it's something that people used to do every Friday, Saturday night, Sunday night, or Sunday afternoon after church or whatever. People would dance. I mean, I love that. I mean, and weddings, like that's most of the time. The only time I get to dance these days is if I'm invited to a wedding, right? Because I don't have a car. I can't go to the dance, the dance clubs where they actually dance. And the problem with a lot of those clubs is the people there they're so focused on the steps, they don't really want to dance. It's crazy. But so most of the times I only get to dance if I go to weddings. But hey, a wedding, isn't it interesting that weddings are still the one place where people dance properly with one another? Why is that? Because dancing and love are synonymous. You can't separate the two. Why? Because dancing is the living, breathing embodiment of the law of the Trogoautoegocrat. It's the common cosmic Trogoautoegocrat. I keep mispronouncing that. The common cosmic Trogoautoegocrat law. It's the cosmic dance. It's the metaphysical dance. It is love. It is love. It's the law of love. And there is no better way to embody that law than dancing. Now, some of you might say, well, what about sex? What about white tantra? What about, yes, fine. Except that white tantra and sex is the law of three. That's the law of the Tria Matsikamno. Because with sex, it's about creation. When you're dancing, it's not about creation. You're not creating anything. You can say, well, you're creating the experience, you're creating the dance. No. You're creating moment by moment by moment by moment by moment, and then boom, it's over. Nobody's videotaping you. Nobody's jotting down the steps. No, you're not creating. You're just dancing. You're just dancing. That's why there's no expectation. That's why there's no ego. That's why there's no outcome to worry about. There's nothing to control. There's no stress. There's no anxiety. There's no depression. There's no expectation, so there's no regret. There's no disappointment. You're just having a dance. Two people in the moment dancing. In the common embodying, in harmony with the music, with the word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word is sound, mantra, melody, and harmony. Like ebony and ivory. Play together in perfect harmony, side by side on my piano. Melody and harmony, perfectly together, side by side, like man and woman, side by side on the dance floor. Like light and dark, side by side. Like severity and mercy, side by side. push and pull, give and take, birth and death, side by side. Because when you dance, you are selfless, you are giving. If you're the man, you're leading. And the woman selflessly follows. But she enjoys the ride. And it's a selfless exchange. It is love. It is pure love. It is the embodiment of everything that we've been talking about. And the fact that it's gone out of fashion, it's gone out of style. But at weddings, when love is supposedly, or, is still placed at the highest pinnacle on that day, on a wedding day, people dance. And they don't just get jiggy with it. No. Doesn't matter what kind of wedding you go to. And I'll have to say that everyone has the best time, the most fun. They get the most pleasure and enjoyment when someone there when they get to dance with someone who knows how to dance, who knows how to lead, or when a polka comes on and anybody and everybody can dance the polka. Because you want to talk about a commoner's dance, the Common-Cosmic Trogoautoegocrat Law. You want to talk about a dance that embodies the boisterous, rambunctious, gregarious, explosive, dynamic birth of a galaxy. You just have to dance a polka. And it's a riot. People go crazy. They're having so much fun. And little kids and old people who came in with like walkers and canes and sticks and scooters, and they get up and they find themselves dancing, and they're dancing the polka. That, like, it's so energizing, it's so uplifting, right? And it's like, oh, the dance snobs would never dream to dance a polka. It doesn't matter. It's for the common folk. It's the Common-Cosmic Trogoautoegocrat Law. And the whole dance hall comes alive, and the whole wedding party and everybody and the in-laws and everybody, they forget everything, all their worries, everything just vanishes as you get a dozen or 2 dozen or 100 or 200 people dancing a polka in a hall. It's like everything vanishes. All there is the moment. There's just that moment. And there's men and women, girls and boys. It doesn't matter. And they're all just lost in that moment. And it's the most outrageous, ridiculous instruments. Okay, right? The harmonica, the friggin' accordion, and all the. It doesn't matter. People can make fun of that music and make fun of that stuff all they want. But at a wedding, there is absolutely nothing the DJ can play that will bring the hall alive and fill that space with more joy and more exuberance and more unfettered, unconditional, untethered love than a polka. It's extraordinary to witness. It's extraordinary to experience. And it's a tragedy that it's, quote, gone out of style. But it's not gone out of style. It's not. People don't know what they're missing until they're at a wedding and someone plays a polka and they get up and they can't help themselves. They can't help themselves. They have to get up and they have to move. And then they discover and they realize and they're like, oh my God, I never would have imagined. I never would imagine the best thing in life is freaking accordion music. and just it's the simplest thing. There's no snobbery, there's no elitism. That's love. That's the embodiment of love, right? And it's unfettered, right? It's untethered. There's no rules, right? Like in the polka, there's no rules. There's no steps. What steps are there? What rules are you breaking? There's no rules. There's one law, right? A man and a woman and the music, the word. That's it. And the joy that elicits pours out of you, fills you up. Just the joy, the bliss, the love. Doesn't matter who your partner is. Skinny, not skinny, tall, short, old, young. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. There is no matter. You're transformed. You're transported. And for those 3.5 minutes, and if you have a really sadistic DJ, it's 6 minutes, it's 7 minutes, it's 10 minutes. And he'll drag it out and he'll play it and he'll mix it and he'll play it and he'll mix them in one polka after another, blending them in, mixing them in. So there's no break. And when he finally stops, when he finally lets the song end, everybody just like collapses with exhaustion. And you have 95-year-olds who haven't moved that much in the entire previous year. And they've just found themselves in heaven for 5 minutes or 6 minutes or 7 minutes straight. And everybody's just pouring sweat. Everybody is soaked to the bone and nobody cares. Nobody cares. Individually and as couples, and if it's 20, if it's 40, if it's 400, or if it's 4,000 in the hall, in the space, you have experienced collective bliss. You've experienced collective love. And there's nothing to be said about it. Everybody just has a smile from ear to ear as they're wiping themselves with napkins and whatever they can find to wipe the sweat off of themselves. And they're drinking, cold drinks to rehydrate themselves because they're soaked to the bone. But there's nothing to say. There's no commentary. There was no that was this or that was that, or but no. Just everybody's just enjoying the moment. Next time you're at a wedding, make sure that you ask the DJ if he has polka music and to play some polka. You'll thank me later. Benjamin says, to me, the essence of life lies in sharing love and striving to be a kind, compassionate person. But how can we keep love alive in our hearts, even in the face of adversity or when our ego threatens to take control? He continues, he says, Paul says, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am only a ringing gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all the mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have absolute faith so as to move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. Yeah. That's a very famous verse from the Bible, Paul's letter, and it's very often what couples choose to have spoke at their weddings. So, in answer to your first question, how can we keep love alive in our hearts? I gave you one of the best strategies and techniques. Music and dancing. The music that fills you with joy, that makes you feel alive, and dancing that, especially with your partner, with your spouse. It doesn't matter what you're facing, in what adversity, or wherever you are. The beauty about dancing is if there's music playing, and you have 2 square feet of floor space, you can dance. You can dance. It doesn't matter if you're in public, if you're in a shopping mall, or you're in a crowded elevator. It doesn't matter if the people around you think you're crazy. Let them think you're crazy. But you and the one you love the most, you can, like that movie from the 80s, Quest for Fire. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but it's a fantastical story about these Neanderthal cavemen who are searching for fire because they don't know how to make fire. And their village source of fire that they have to keep going all the time, it burns out. So these 3 Neanderthal men, cavemen, are sent on this quest to find fire and bring it back to the village. So, and when they do find fire and they're trying to keep it alive, they're trying to keep it burning, they're trying to keep it from going out. And there's wind and there's storms and there's saber-tooth tigers and there's all kind, there's all kinds of stuff that's this adversity. But their job, their task, is to keep that flame lit, and they'll do everything in their power to keep that flame lit. And the spark within us and the love within us is like that. And let the winds blow, let the hurricane come, let the tsunamis come. They will come. The adversity is there, but the adversity is there to do what? To make our flame stronger, because it's only with the power of that fire, the power of that flame, that we can even face that adversity. Because what is that flame? What is that power? It's fluency. It's the verse. It's the verb. It's the word of God. But what should come out of that, facing that adversity, are verses, new verses, novel verses. This is why, as much as I appreciate scripture, I'm more interested in writing scripture. I'm more interested in bringing into the world new verses. And how am I able to do that? Because of the adversity and the adversary that I face each and every day, and the adversity that I face each and every day that forces me to co-create new verses. New verses like now, like these visualizations. Right? Like these are something new. They're of course they're not new, but they're new in certain aspects. And so the love in our relationship should be the same. And every time we face an adversity and say, how do we keep love alive in our hearts? It's when we face the adversity that the love in our hearts, we turn up the heat. We turn up the dial. We turn up the flame. We face that adversity head on, and we face that adversity with the love in our hearts. It's the love in our hearts that's going to get us through the adversity. Nothing that you and I are going to dream up. I didn't dream this up. I didn't think of this. This is not something that I worked out in my head or I figured it out. This came to me. This was given to me. This flamed up in my heart. And I had to put it down and I had to share it with you. Because the world is going to need this. Maybe not right now, maybe not in 6 months from now or 6 years from now, but the world needs this. I don't know when it's going to be. I don't even know if I'm going to be the one who actually gets to give it to the world. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm just here dancing. Right? And when this came to me, I had to dance with it. I had to dance it out. I had to dance. Benjamin says, thank you for the thoughtful advice. I do enjoy dancing with my wife from time to time. It truly brings joy and warmth to the heart. Have you ever seen the movie Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio? It was directed by Steven Spielberg. There's a scene in it when a very young Leonardo DiCaprio is at the house of his fiance's parents. And he peeks in on the kitchen after dinner when everybody's settling in for the night. He peeks into the kitchen. He finds his fiance's parents washing the dishes together. And the two of them are side by side. One's washing and one's drying. And they're just gently rocking back and forth. If you've seen the movie, it's an unforgettable scene because it's so very important to Leonardo DiCaprio's character and the story arc that he's on. The whole reason why he ran away from home in the first place, and what he's on a quest to recover the entire time that he's running. What his heart longs for more than anything. When he peers into that kitchen, he catches a glimpse of it. He sees it. He sees that it's possible. It is possible to have that kind of love, to have that kind of bond, have that family connection between a husband and a wife. No words are spoken. It's the most subtle but beautiful scene that speaks volumes. If nothing else, go on Google and search for that scene from Catch Me If You Can, or just watch the movie again. And if you enjoy dancing with your wife and you watch that scene and you meditate on the importance of what we talked about today in terms of love and the true nature of love being the law, the Trogoautoegocrat Law, and everything that I shared with you about dancing in the polka and so you will never you will never not take advantage of an opportunity to dance in however subtle way that you do that. And that's what that scene from Catch Me If You Can will show you. It doesn't take much to dance with your wife. You can be doing dishes with her and dancing with her at the same time while you're doing dishes with her. And when you do that, the act of doing dishes with your wife becomes an act of making love. But only if it becomes a dance. But it doesn't take much. That's what I'm trying to get across here. When we're talking about love and unconditional love, a little goes a long way. And many couples have said that the secret to the longevity of their marriage has been the so-called little things. The little things. It's the little things that count. A little goes a long way. And just like a little polka goes a long way. You can't do 4 hours of polka. It's impossible. People would be leaving on stretchers and in ambulances. No. Few minutes of polka, whew, That'll keep it for maximum a couple minutes, a couple polkas an hour, maximum. You can't take more than that, because when it comes to love, a little goes a long way, and polka is like super concentrated joy and bliss. You can't, people have to sit down and for at least 5 or 10 minutes after they do a polka. It's like they should do polka. Forget about spinning classes and aerobics classes, whatever. They should just have polka classes. You want a good cardio workout? Go do polka. Do polka. Also good for the soul, right? That's anyway. I'm not going to beat the dead horse anymore on that one. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? We're going to wrap it up. It's we're at the 3-hour mark, so we might as well. It's probably a good time to wrap it up. Again, when it comes to Valentine's Day, you'll get plenty of advice about, plenty of people talking about plenty of different things, romantic love, this and that, so and so. You know me, I'm a big picture kind of guy, and I'm all about the essence of things. My clairvoyance is in the world of archetypes. So I want to get to the foundation. I want to get right to the bottom. I want to get to the source code of reality. So when it comes about love and, this and that, the devil's in the details. You get to the base, you get to the bottom, you get to a comprehension of the Trogoautoegocrat Law, the law of two, the foundational law of reality, of pure selflessness, and how that selflessness expresses to create the universe and to know itself and to evolve and to grow and to generate novelty and creativity in the great university of existence. There's nothing anybody else can tell you that's new from like romance or Valentine's Day romance, this or that, the other thing. You know what? That's all fine and dandy. That's all window dressing. If you don't have the foundation, if you don't have the core, none of that has a leg to stand on. But once you have the core, then you know what? The little things will just come to you. And any little stupid thing all of a sudden can become an act of love. The stupidest thing. I have a very, very close, deep bond with someone who's on the other side of the world. We have not met in the flesh in this lifetime. We make one another laugh. We send little notes on Messenger and stuff like that. And the things that we send one another and the things that we say to one another, to anybody else, they would have us committed. To anybody else, they would hear the things that we say to each other and they would say, what the hell? What's romantic about that? Or what's funny about that? Or what's, doesn't matter. It's not for them. It's between her and myself. And between us, these are magical words that unite us and connect us on a level that in those moments, we may as well be in the same shower, despite the fact that she's on the other side of the world and that we have not met in the flesh in this lifetime. When you comprehend love at the foundational level and you have a bond with someone on that level of pure selflessness, of unconditional give and take, then peeling a potato is an act of passionate lovemaking, or doing the dishes, or cleaning out the garage. It's unbelievable. Try it. Test it. Test my words, Buddha said. Don't take my word for it. Test my words. And this is how it is that couples who have gone through Incredible. Benjamin asked about adversity. I had parents who had to flee communist Hungary when the Czechoslovakian Revolution broke out. They had to flee Austria. They had already fled Hungary, but they were in Austria, right on the Czechoslovakian border. And they had a very close friend who worked on the border patrol. And one day, he collapsed. He broke down their door. In the village that they were, nobody locked their door, right? So he kicked in their door and he collapsed in their house. And he looked up and he could barely breathe. And he said, "Russian tanks coming, border." That's all he managed to get out because he was so out of breath because he rode his bicycle, I don't know how many kilometers through the mountains from the border where he was patrolled back to the village to be able to tell my parents that Russian tanks were at the border. Because if those tanks had crossed the border into Austria and found any dissidents from the Soviet Union, they would have been shot on sight as deserters. And my parents knew that, and the Austrian government knew that, and they rounded up all the Eastern Europeans, all the defectors who defected to Austria, and they sent them all to one of two places, either England or the United States. It's the only countries that would take them. So my parents actually ended up in the U.S., where immediately when they landed, and they saw that my dad had military experience, they said, "Oh, great, okay, here are your papers. Here are your papers to make you an American, and these papers make you a soldier in the military. You're going to Vietnam." And I mean, I could spend the next 4 hours regaling you with stories of what my mom and dad went through, right up until her cancer and her death. So, there's only one thing that got them through all of that. And so it's that's the level of commitment, of selflessness, of total and complete surrender to whatever it is, that mission, that purpose, that vision, that whatever it is. And you talk about surrendering and allowing and accepting your circumstances, and then having to do what must be done. My father had an excellent job in Austria. He worked in Vienna as a fashion designer, as an up and coming famous fashion designer, and they had no kids yet, and they lived in a very nice house in a very beautiful, like, rustic Austrian village. And every weekend my dad could afford to take my mom to the opera, and they went to the cafes, and they were living the high life. And 1967, or was it 67, 68, Czechoslovakian Revolution, they had to leave it all. Everything. All their possessions, everything. The job, the house, everything. They just had to leave it and get the hell out of Dodge. Because they didn't know. There was no internet. There was no CNN. There was no 24 hours news. Nobody knew what the hell was going on. It was the height of the Cold War. All they knew was that Russian tanks, Soviet tanks, were coming to the border of Czechoslovakia. For all they knew, this was World War III starting. They didn't know. So yeah, they too, their lives too has been a life of consuming and being consumed. Give and take. Leah says, thank you, Atlas. Much love and blessings to you and all. Thank you, Leah, for being with us today, and to you and to everyone. Benjamin says, thank you for today's live stream, sir. I truly appreciate it. I'm learning something new from you. Well, I'm glad. It warms my heart to know that. But rest assured that I'm learning something new from me too. I've said many, many times, these live streams are as much, if not more, for my benefit than they are for yours. So, but listen, to all of you, thank you again for being here, for taking the time. Have a excellent week. I don't know what the weather is like where you are. We've had quite a bit of snow, so I'm probably heading out to shovel the driveway. So I want to wish you all the best. Have a safe and productive week, and hopefully I'll see you all next Sunday. Until then, take care and inferential peace. Much love, everyone. Take care.